Hi, everybody. The digitalization of business communication has transformed the way procurement and supply management professionals negotiate. Electronic negotiation or e-negotiation include any negotiation activity conducted through digital channels, including email correspondence, video conferencing platforms such as Microsoft Teams or Zoom, electronic sourcing systems like e-sourcing, reverse auctions, and electronic RFQ request for quotation portals, and enterprise procurement platforms such as SAP, Ariba, Coupa, and Jagger. Global supply chains spanning multiple time zones and cost efficiencies of digital communication and the acceleration brought by the COVID-19 pandemic has collectively made in-person supplier negotiation the exception rather than the norm in many industries. While e-negotiation offers undeniable advantages such as speed, cost efficiency, scalability, and the ability to manage multiple supplier negotiation at the same time, it also introduces a set of well-documented challenges that procurement professionals must understand and actively manage. This presentation examines both dimensions, the liabilities of electronic negotiation and the evidence-based strategy for mitigating them. Let's start with the first major impact, how technology changes the social dynamics of negotiation. When negotiations move online, power differences tend to level out. In face-to-face settings, things like titles, seniority, office settings, and physical presence signal status. Online, those signals are less visible. A junior procurement analyst emailing through a digital platform may interact almost as an equal with a senior sales director. That can be empowering, but it can also be risky. In high context cultures like Japan, South Korea, or even here in GCC, hierarchy and seniority communicate respect and seriousness. When those signs disappear, misunderstanding can happen. So, we lose nonverbal clues. In person, supply managers read body language, tone of voice, eye contact, hesitation, all of which help assess credibility and whether a supplier is near their wake-away point. In email, these cues are gone. Even in video calls, they are muted by screen and camera's angle. That means we lose valuable negotiation intelligence. Also, status and social differences become harder to read, especially in a cross-cultural context. For example, in Chinese business culture, understanding who holds senior authority on the supplier side is critical. In email threads or digital platforms, these hierarchies are often invisible, making it harder to show the appropriate respect or direct influence effectively. These issues are even more complicated. Digital procurement platforms, especially blind reverse auctions, intentionally create anonymity to push price down. But in strategic supplier relationship, anonymity works against us. If suppliers feel They are dealing with a faceless institution rather than a person. Trust weakens. They are less likely to offer a good term or to collaborate or even to extend goodwill during disruptions. We saw this clearly during COVID-19 when companies like Toyota and Ford shifted to fully electronic negotiations for critical components. Some suppliers prioritize customers where strong personal relationship already exists. So overall, technology does not just change the standards of negotiation, it reshapes power, trust, and intelligence gathering in fundamental way. Let's look at how e-negotiation affects process quality and relationship outcomes compared to face-to-face interaction. First, e-negotiation often take longer, especially for complex multi-issue deals. What could be solved in 10 minutes in a meeting can take days over back and forth emails. In procurement, that delays affect sourcing lead times, production schedules, and inventory planning. Second, outcomes tend to be less satisfying. Email negotiations often produce lower joint gains and lower satisfaction. In supply management terms, that means less creative contracts, weaker alignment of interests, and greater post-contract frustration. This is especially problematic for strategic partnerships involving co-development or supply chain integration. Third, e-negotiation are more impersonal and don't build relationship. Strong supplier relationship management depends on trust and human connection. If communication is limited to portals and transactional emails, that relationship depth never develops. And without that relationship equity, suppliers are less likely to often offer flexibility or go extra mile during disruptions. Fourth, communication online is often more aggressive. People are more direct and destructive digitally than in person. In procurement, that can show up as overall aggressive price demands or escalating email exchange that damage relationships, especially with smaller owner managed suppliers. Fifth, written messages are easily misunderstood. Email email lacks tones, emphasis, and also lacks context. A message like "We expect best price by Friday" might sound reasonable to the buyer, but feel like a command to the supplier. And in cross-cultural context, the risk of misinterpretation is even higher. We have seen real-world consequences. For example, in 2015, Morrison's supermarket in UK sent a standardized email to around 20 suppliers demanding lump sum payments by a fixed deadline. This was considered as a breach of the grocery supply chain code of practice, and Morrison's had to formally apologize. Similarly, in 2017, ASDA sent a mass email to import suppliers extending payment terms to 90 days, initiating major backlash. Both cases show how impersonal, standardized electronic communication without prior dialogue or relationship sensitivity can create regulatory, reputational, and relational damage. So, overall, e-negotiation doesn't just change speed, it changes satisfaction, trust, tone, and ultimately durability of the supplier relationship. So, what is the impact of electronic media on negotiation? Negotiator tends to take more risk. The psychological distance created by electronic communication lowers embarrassments and reduces the perceived consequences of aggressive or risky negotiating behavior. In procurement, this may reveal as buyers making extremely low offers that would be socially uncomfortable to deliver in person, or as suppliers making commitment in writing that they cannot fulfill in real. The absence of face-to-face accountability encourages risk-taking that can ultimately destroy the integrity of suppliers' arrangements. Also, real-time e-negotiations such as video calls or electronic reverse auctions reserve some degree of the dynamics interaction of face-to-face negotiation, enabling procurement professionals to review, respond, and adjust in the moment. Asynchronous communication, primarily like emails and document exchange, introduces significant time-based gap that create opportunities for misunderstanding. Procurement teams should intentionally select the suitable communication mode for each phase of the negotiation. For example, they can use real-time channels for complex and multi-issue discussions. Loss of information richness. Communication channels differ in their information richness, the degree to which they can convey complex messages. Face-to-face communication is the best channel, followed by video conference, telephone, and finally written text. As procurement negotiations increasingly migrate to digital channels, the richness of communication exchange is reduced. More difficult to provide feedback and conduct active listening. Active listening is initial negotiation competency. In electronic negotiations, active listening is limited. A procurement professional cannot nod, maintain eye contact, or lean forward to signal engagement. This limitation makes it difficult to build the collaborative dynamics. Also, e-negotiators ask fewer questions and tend to make more assumptions. Asking analytical questions is one of the most powerful tools in negotiation. It enables negotiators to uncover suppliers' interest, identify a flexibility in price or terms, and raise creative solutions. E-negotiators ask few questions, likely because the social pressure to engage interactively is reduced in electronic environments. What does silence mean? In face-to-face negotiation, a period of silence after a proposal is a rich communicative act. It might signal discomfort, resistance, or strategic consideration. In electronic negotiation, the silence of an acknowledged email is confusing. Has the supplier not seen the message? Or maybe they are consulting with senior management or considering withdrawing. Therefore, it is not clear why they are not responding. For procurement professionals managing time-sensitive sourcing decisions, this uncertainty introduces strategic and operational risk. Industry example. Here we will be discussing Amazon. They uses electronic reverse auctions, or what we call e-auction, through its procurement platform. This illustrates both the power and the risk of a negotiation. While e-auctions generate competitive pricing by allowing multiple suppliers to bid in real time, Amazon has documented cases where suppliers, under the psychological pressure of real-time electronic competition, submitted bids below their true cost floors, an indicator of excessive risk-taking in electronic environment, subsequently leading to quality failures and supply disruptions when the contracted price prove unsustainable. So, how to mitigate the negative effects? First, invest in face-to-face relationship before moving to electronic communication. The initial supplier qualification visit, the pre-contract supplier conference, or the business review meeting serve as the primary vehicle for relationship investment that will carry the entire subsequent digital interaction. If travel is not feasible, due to geographical constraints or budget limitation or time pressure, then have an extended phone conversation. Voice communication enables real-time dialogue and creates a degree of personal connection that text alone cannot achieve. Second, take extra time to carefully reread and edit emails before sending. As suggested strategy, draft the email, set it aside, and critically review all important supplier communications before sending. They can be easily forwarded to the supplier's senior management, legal team, or in extreme cases to the buyer's competitors or even the press. So every procurement email should be written with the assumption that it will be read by the widest possible audience. Also, in procurement, misdirected emails can cause serious commercial and legal consequences. Double check the address you put into the to and the CC, including the unintentional disclosure of confidential sourcing strategies to, for example, competing suppliers, the accidental copying of suppliers on an internal assessment of their performance, or the distribution of commercially sensitive pricing information to unauthorized receipts. A review of receipts address before sending is a critical and essential risk control measure. Third, use generally accepted email protocols. Professional electronic communication in supply management must follow established norms of business correspondence. This means using formal greeting and closing, structuring messages clearly with a defined subject line, limiting each email to a single principal topic where possible, and maintaining a professional tone. Also, use clear, concise language, especially with contract terms, pricing structure, delivery requirements, quality standards, and compliance obligations. Instead of writing, for example, we need this as soon as possible, we can write, we require delivery no later than 15th of March to be delivered at the distribution center. So provide exactly the detailed information required. Also, avoid using all caps, extensive punctuation symbols, underlining, bolding, italics, or off-the-cuff comments. These formatting elements carry implicit emotional signals that can weaken the professional tones and constructive intent of procurement correspondence. Writing in all caps is universally interpreted as shouting or expressing anger. Off-the-cuff comments is informal, careless remarks that would be acceptable in verbal conversation and are particularly risky in written form, where they can be decontextualized and misinterpreted. Don't copy emails to the recipient's superior. This is perceived as not trusting the receipts. In supplier relationship management, copying the supplier's senior management on routine communication or worse, on communication that implicitly criticize the supplier's performance is a significant breach of professional protocol. It can be interpreted as a threat or as an expression of mistrust. Such tactics may produce short-term compliance but will damage the collaborative spirit of the supplier relationship. In procurement, escalation to senior supplier management should be considered deliberated decision, not a default response to communication difficulties. Having examined the risks and mitigation strategies associated with e-negotiation, now we will discuss a set of proactive best practices that enable procurement professionals to leverage electronic communication effectively as a negotiation tool. First, use a blended negotiation approach. Best practice in strategic procurement typically follow this sequence. Initial relationship establishment through in-person meetings or video conferences. Basic commercial negotiation through a combination of video calls and structured written proposals. Formal documentation and confirmation of agreed terms through emails and digital contract management platforms, and ongoing relationship management through a mix of in-person reviews and electronic communication. This blended approach preserves the informational richness of face-to-face interaction for complex discussions while capitalizing on the efficiency of digital channels for routine communication. Also, share relevant personal information initially. The disclosure of brief, relevant information, professional backgrounds, shared industry experience, mutual organization goals significantly improves the quality of the subsequent interaction. For procurement professionals, this might mean opening an initial supplier email or a video call with a brief introduction that contextualize the procurement relationship. For example, the organization's strategic goal, the importance of the supplier category, and the buyer's personal interest in developing a productive working relationship. This humanizes the interaction and mitigates the depersonalization effect of electronic communication. Also, establish common ground. Identifying and explicitly acknowledging shared interests, shared values, and objectives creates a cooperative framing. Common ground typically exists around shared interest in the supply community, quality assurance, operational efficiency, and long-term commercial relationship stability. Procurement professionals who open electronic negotiations by articulating these shared interests are more likely to provoke collaborative problem-solving behavior from the suppliers. Also, summarize agreements and concessions frequently. Given the risks of misunderstanding in electronic communications and the absence of real-time clarification, procurement professionals should develop the discipline of explicitly summarizing agreed positions, concessions made, and outstanding issues frequently. This practice prevents misaligned expectations from hardening into dispute contract terms. It creates a clear written record of the negotiation progression, and it signals to the supplier that the buyer is organized and serious in their commitment to a mutually agreed outcome. Use emotions. This might um, might not appear informal in an academic context. It reflects a body of research demonstrating that strategically placed, contextually appropriate emotions in electronic communication can effectively convey warmth and goodwill. However, this must be deployed with cultural sensitivity. For example, in high formality professional cultures such as Germany or Japan, informal digital conventions may be perceived as unprofessional. Also, include positive language addressing the importance of the relationship. Suppliers who perceive themselves as a valued partners are more likely to allocate production capacities during disruptions, give priority during supply shortages, invest in joint quality improvements initiatives, and offer proactive early warning of potential supply disruptions. So, procurement professional should incorporate a relationship oriented language into their electronic communication, acknowledging suppliers' contribution and expressing appreciation for responsiveness and quality. Also, maintain a folder of all correspondence. In procurement, comprehensive documentation of electronic negotiations is not only good organizational practice, it is a legal and commercial requirement. The email and document record of supplier negotiation are critical evidence in the event of contract disputes, quality claims, or regulatory audit. Also, know when and how to reply or to forward electronic correspondence. Not all suppliers' communication deserve an immediate response, and not all correspondence should be forwarded to other parties without careful consideration. Urgent commercial matters such as suppliers' request for clarification on specification or pending supply risk notification requires timely response, typically within one business day. Routine inquiries may be batch. Sensitive communication, particularly those involving price, contract terms, or performance concerns, should never be forwarded without explicit authorizations and careful review of their content and audience implications. Proofread the entire message before sending. A typo in a unit price, an error in a delivery date, or incorrectly stated Incoterm can result in suppliers interpreting a purchase order or contract term in a different way from what the buyer intended, creating the condition for costly disputes, reworks, and supply failures. It will take longer. Actually, it will always take longer, regardless of the efficiency gains that digital platforms offer. E-negotiation consistently take longer than anticipated. The digitalization of supply chain interaction accelerated by global sourcing, enterprise procurement platforms, and behavioral shifts due to COVID-19 pandemics, means that supply management professionals will conduct most of their supplier negotiation through electronic channels. The question is no longer whether to use electronic negotiation, but how to do so with the skill, discipline, and strategic awareness that procurement function demands. To conclude, as supply chains grow more complex, more global, and more digitally integrated, the procurement professionals who will create the greatest organizational value are those who master not only the technical dimensions of sourcing and contracting, but the human dimensions of electronic communication, combining digital fluency with the interpersonal intelligence, cultural sensitivity, and relational discipline that distinguish truly excellent negotiation practice. Thanks a lot.